the laugh didn't explode. It didn't burst out and fill the room like a punchline. It crept in. First a quick breath through his nose, then the tiniest shake of his shoulders, like he was trying not to laugh and failing on purpose. And it wasn't a laugh meant to make anyone else laugh. It was a laugh that said, "I'm above this. You're cute for trying." It echoed off the glass walls of Garrick's corner office and came back at me again and again. That space was built to impress. Clean lines, expensive silence, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like it belonged to him. But standing there, it didn't feel impressive. It felt like a box. "A 10% raise," he said, still half laughing. "After 12 years. He didn't wait for my answer. Another burst came out louder, and it cut me off before I could even open my mouth. Like my response wasn't part of the meeting. I stood there holding my portfolio, suddenly aware of how stiff my arms were. I'd rehearsed this conversation, timed my breathing, practiced where I'd stand so I wouldn't look defensive. I'd even planned my face, how not to look like I was begging. None of it mattered. The portfolio was heavy. 60 pages. I knew exactly what was inside it because I'd lived every page. Every algorithm I'd built from scratch. Every process improvement that shaved minutes, then hours, then entire days off delivery timelines. Every late night when the building emptied out and I stayed because something still wasn't clean enough yet, while he collected bonuses big enough to joke about buying vacation homes. "The system I designed cut delivery times by 50%, I said. I hated how small my voice sounded. "The Eastwood account alone." Garrick waved his hand without even looking at the documents. Not even a glance, just a lazy, dismissive flick, like brushing away a fly. He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, like all of this was mildly entertaining. Like he'd put this meeting on his calendar as a joke. "Everyone's replaceable," he said. "You know that. Even you." Then came the smile. The one I'd seen on earnings calls, press photos, during town halls, perfectly measured, completely hollow. The kind of smile that belongs to a brand, not a person. "If you think you're worth more," he added, "try your luck somewhere else." Something gave way inside me. Not my heart, not anything dramatic. It was quieter than that, like a subtle collapse. Like realizing the floor you've been standing on for years was never solid to begin with. 12 years. 12 years of staying late. Of saying yes when I should have said no. Of telling myself loyalty would eventually be rewarded, because surely it had to mean something. "I understand," I said, already gathering my portfolio. My hands were shaking. I hated that detail. I hated that he could probably see it. I hated that my body was telling the truth when I wanted it to act calm. "Listen," Garrick said, his tone shifting, smoother, softer, like he was doing me a favor. "You're very good at what you do, but you're a back office function. The board doesn't even know your name. That's just business." That sentence followed me out. Back office function. That was the moment I knew something had changed. For context, my name is Ivy Reeves. I'm 34 years old. I work in supply chain optimization. Algorithms, predictive modeling, systems most people don't notice unless they fail spectacularly. Until that day, I was deeply conflict-averse. The kind of person who apologized when someone else stepped on her foot. The kind who stayed at the same company for 12 years while being paid roughly 20% below market rate, because I believed consistency mattered, because I believed my work would speak for itself. Before I go further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? This happened in the Midwest, but I learned pretty fast that geography doesn't matter. Stories like this repeat everywhere. Different buildings, same patterns. If this hits a nerve, hit like, subscribe, because what happened next changed my life, and it might change how you see your own job. I walked back to my desk. Yes. A cubicle, after 12 years. I passed glass-walled offices belonging to managers who'd been at the company half as long as I had. People who spoke confidently in meetings but couldn't explain the systems they owned if you pressed them for details. The kind of people who were fluent in buzzwords and helpless the second you asked how anything actually worked. Our department used to have 15 people. Now there were 3, not because the workload had shrunk, because my systems had automated most of it. When I sat down, my computer lit up with a new email notification. The quarterly company newsletter, front and center, a feature praising Garrick's innovative supply chain revolution. Eastwood was mentioned by name. My work, my models, 6 months of 18-hour days, all credited to him. Next to my keyboard sat a cup of coffee I'd abandoned hours earlier, back when I finally worked up the courage to ask for that raise. It was cold now, the kind of cold that tastes like regret. Beside it was a framed photo of my parents. My dad worked 35 years at the same factory. When it shut down, he still said loyalty mattered. Like saying it out loud could make it true again. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook. I'd kept it for years, personal habit. Inside were ideas I explored on weekends, systems I built on my own laptop, dates, times, notes written late at night when I couldn't sleep, personal projects. I flipped back a few years and stopped. Those pages had become the backbone of the company's entire distribution system. At the top of the page, in my handwriting, were the words, "Personal Project, Predictive Supply Chain Optimization." What Garrick never knew, and what legal never bothered to check, was that I had never signed over the rights to those systems. My employment contract covered work done on company time, using company resources. My most valuable work didn't fall under that category. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I'd saved but never called. Hayden, operations director at our largest competitor. He'd reached out more than once over the years. The last message was 6 months old. "The offer still stands. Whenever you're ready." My thumb hovered over the screen. 12 years of loyalty told me to stop, to be reasonable, to not burn bridges, to be professional, to swallow it and keep going like I always did. Then I remembered Garrick's laughter. I pressed call. Hayden picked up on the second ring. "Hayden speaking." "This is Ivy Reeves," I said. I surprised myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I think we should finally have that conversation." There was a brief pause on the line, not hesitation, recognition. "I was starting to think you'd never call," he said. I could hear the smile in his voice. "Are you free for dinner tonight?" 5 hours later, I was sitting across from him in a restaurant that usually required reservations weeks in advance. He'd made one call and somehow found us a table anyway. That should have been my first clue about the difference between Porter and Radius. Hayden didn't rush. He didn't pitch. He didn't do that corporate dance where someone pretends not to want you. He asked questions. "I've followed your work for years," he said, swirling the ice in his water glass. "Or rather, I've followed the sudden jumps in Porter's capabilities that seem to line up perfectly with gaps in your LinkedIn activity." My stomach tightened. "The Eastwood systems," he continued. "Those weren't incremental improvements. They were architectural shifts." "How do you know they were mine?" I asked. He smiled, not smug, matter of fact. "Because Garrick doesn't have the technical background to understand even the surface layer of what those systems do," he said. "And because we tried to reverse engineer them." I felt my chest tighten. And we couldn't," he said simply. "That's when I knew we needed the person behind them." I took a slow sip of water, buying myself a second to think. "So what exactly are you offering?" I asked. "Leadership," he said immediately. "Triple your current salary, stock options, a team of your own." Then he leaned forward a little, like he wanted to make sure I heard the next part. "But more importantly, recognition. Your name on your work." That part landed harder than the numbers. "And if I bring systems I developed on my own time?" I asked carefully. "Concepts, theoretical models, work that was never formally acquired." Something flickered in his expression. Not greed, understanding. "We have a formal IP acquisition process," he said, "with compensation, clear terms. We don't expect to own our employees' personal work by default." I reached into my bag and placed my leather notebook on the table. "I have documentation," I said. "Dates, development logs, proof these were personal projects." He didn't touch it right away, just looked at it. "That's quite an oversight on Porter's part," he said finally. "Garrick doesn't value back-office functions," I replied. "Legal included, apparently." 2 weeks later, I placed my resignation letter on Garrick's desk. He barely looked up from his screen. 2 weeks' notice," he said, scanning the page. "Where are you going?" I considered lying. Honestly, it would have been easier. Less drama, decided against it. Radius Shipping Solutions. That got his attention. "Our competitor," his head snapped up. "That's unfortunate timing. We're in final negotiations with Eastwood to expand the contract." "I know," I said. "I built the delivery model for that proposal." His expression shifted, surprise first, then something closer to concern. "We should discuss retention," he said. Perhaps that raise you mentioned. The offer from Radius is triple my current salary, I said evenly. Leadership role, equity. He laughed, but it sounded different this time. Thinner. They're overpaying, he said. You'll disappoint them once they realize you can't deliver what they're expecting. I smiled. A small one. Real. We'll see. My final 2 weeks were strangely calm. Like my brain finally stopped trying to negotiate with reality. I documented everything. Trained my replacement, a recent graduate who looked equal parts terrified and impressed. Backed up my personal project logs. Saved emails where I'd shared ideas without any formal transfer of ownership. On my last day, I met with legal. Vance handled my exit interview. He had the tired eyes of someone who'd spent years cleaning up executive messes he didn't create. Standard paperwork, he said, sliding documents across the desk. Non-compete, confidentiality, confirmation you're not taking company property. I read every line. I'm not signing the non-compete, I said. Vance blinked. It's standard. It wasn't in my original contract, I replied. And I'm not agreeing to it now. I met his eyes. And I'm not taking company property, I continued. I am taking my personal intellectual property that was never formally acquired. His brow furrowed. What personal property? I opened my notebook. These systems, I said, developed on my own time, using my own resources. Porter implemented them without completing any IP acquisition process. He flipped through the pages. Slowly, these are the core systems, he said quietly, for almost everything. Yes, I said, they are. He leaned back, color draining from his face. I need to make some calls, he said. Of course, I replied, standing. But my employment ends today, and my personal property leaves with me. I walked out of Porter's glass headquarters at 5:17 p.m. on a Friday. By Monday morning, I was sitting in a corner office at Radius, explaining to my team of 5 algorithm specialists, my team, how we were going to rebuild an industry from the inside out. 6 weeks later, the first implementation went live. Delivery times dropped by 30%. Operating costs fell by 25%. Our sales team approached Eastwood with hard data, not promises, not slides, facts. The morning Eastwood announced they were switching providers, my phone lit up. Garrick. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before leaving a message. Ivy, this is Garrick. We need to talk immediately. Porter is prepared to discuss consulting opportunities. Significant compensation. I saved the message. Didn't respond. 2 days later, he was waiting by my car in Radius's parking garage. This is inappropriate, I said, stopping a few feet away. You've put 300 jobs at risk, he said urgently. Porter is facing a crisis because of what you took. I didn't take anything that belonged to Porter, I said calmly. I took my personal intellectual property. Nobody will believe that, he snapped. It looks like corporate espionage. I have dated documentation of every project, I replied. Your legal team never did their job, and you never valued mine enough to care. He stepped closer. Name your price, he said. We'll double whatever Radius is paying. I thought about my cubicle, the laughter, the raise request. You once told me everyone's replaceable, I said quietly. I'm just following your advice. The following quarter was brutal. Porter's stock dropped 62%. Analysts tried to explain it in clean language. Loss of technical advantage. Unexpected operational degradation. Leadership instability. But inside the industry, everyone knew what it really was. They'd lost the systems that held everything together. 200 employees were laid off in less than a month. Garrick resigned under pressure from the board. I watched the announcement from my office at Radius, the news playing silently on a screen while I reviewed implementation plans for 3 new clients who had just switched providers. Clients Porter used to brag about. Then came the lawsuit. Porter sued me for theft of intellectual property. The filing was aggressive, dramatic, full of phrases like willful misappropriation and irreparable harm. It collapsed in court. My documentation was airtight. Time-stamped notebooks, personal device logs, emails where ownership was never transferred. The judge dismissed the case, noting Porter's failure to secure proper IP rights for systems they'd implemented for years. The morning after the dismissal, Garrick showed up at Radius. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, just diminished. You destroyed everything, he said from my doorway. No, I replied calmly. You did that when you decided people were disposable. He started to argue, then stopped. The people who lost their jobs, he said quietly, they weren't executives, they had families. Mortgages. The weight of that sat heavy in my chest. I know, I said. That's why Radius has hired 57 former Porter employees in the last 3 months. His eyes flickered. People who weren't responsible for your decisions shouldn't suffer for them. He left without another word. That evening, I received an email from Eastwood's procurement director. The implementation exceeded expectations. Delivery times are 40% better than our previous provider. The board has approved an expanded contract. I forwarded it to Hayden with one line, "This is just the beginning." My name now appeared on patent filings. My photo hung in the lobby alongside other Radius executives. My team grew to 15 people, many of them former Porter employees who finally received credit for what they did. And yet, the story didn't feel finished. A few weeks later, the receptionist called me. "There's someone here to see you," she said carefully. She says she worked at Porter, Marlene. She'd been head of customer service for 15 years, longer than I'd been there. We used to eat lunch together sometimes, quiet little breaks where neither of us had the energy to pretend leadership made sense. We'd talk about burnout, about how the people who actually kept the place running were always the first to be treated like they were replaceable. She stood in the lobby, gripping her purse like it was the only thing holding her upright. "I lost my job last week," she said as soon as we sat down. "My whole department, 37 people. I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it. "Everyone says you're the reason Porter's falling apart," she continued, "that you stole something." "I didn't steal anything," I said. I explained the documentation, the court ruling, what the judge said. She listened without interrupting, eyes steady like she'd already heard every rumor and came anyway. "I'm 56, Ivy," she said. "Who's going to hire me now?" I leaned forward. "Radius will. Or at least let me talk to Hayden." She shook her head. "I didn't come for a job." "Then why did you come?" She looked around my office. The view, the quiet, the nameplate on the door. "I wanted to know if it was worth it," she said. "If what you gained was worth what the rest of us lost." That question lodged in my chest like something sharp. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," I said finally. "I just wanted what I'd earned." "We all want that," she replied. After she left, I sat alone for a long time, staring at the wall like it might give me a different answer. That night, instead of replying to Hayden's celebratory dinner invite, I opened a spreadsheet. I listed every Porter employee I knew had lost their job. I searched LinkedIn, added notes, skills, experience, anything that might help. By midnight, I had 212 names. The next morning, I walked into Hayden's office without knocking. "We need to talk about Porter's former employees," I said. He studied the spreadsheet. "We've already hired quite a few," he said. "Not enough," I replied. "We benefited from what happened. We have a responsibility." After a long pause, he nodded. "Draft the proposal." 3 weeks later, Operation Rebound launched. Radius committed to interviewing every qualified former Porter employee. We partnered with training firms, created consulting roles for those nearing retirement. The industry noticed. Applications tripled. Clients started mentioning our ethics in sales meetings like it was a selling point. Marlene called the next day. "Was this your doing?" "Yes," she paused. "I'll consult, not full-time." "Name your terms," I said. Not everyone forgave me. Jason from operations refused my call. Patris from accounting sent a bitter email about loyalty and betrayal. I saved it in a folder labeled consequences. 8 months after I left Porter, I got an email from Vance, their former legal counsel. "Coffee. There's something you should know. We met halfway between our offices." "I was let go," he said, "part of the last round." "I'm sorry," I replied. "That's not why I asked to meet," he said. "It's about your algorithms." He leaned in. "When you raised the IP issue during your exit interview, I went straight to Garrick, told him we needed to investigate." I felt my jaw tighten. "He showed me emails," Vance continued, "from 3 years ago. You'd asked to formally transfer ownership, suggested compensation, CC'd legal." My coffee froze halfway to my lips. "He dismissed it," Vance said. "Told you to implement first. We'll sort it out later." "He knew," I whispered. Vance nodded. "He knew everything and still ordered the lawsuit." I sat back, the final piece clicking into place. Porter hadn't collapsed because I left. It collapsed because it was already hollow. That night, Garrick called again. "I'm calling to apologize," he said. The board had removed him completely. Porter was filing for Chapter 11. "I misjudged you," he said. "I misjudged everyone." The next day, Radius hired 173 former Porter employees. Marlene became our Chief Customer Experience Officer. Jason eventually joined as a consultant. Even Vance came aboard to help with our growing legal needs. 1 year after I walked out of Garrick's office, I stood on stage accepting an Industry Innovation Award. "Innovation isn't just about systems," I said. "It's about people. Companies that treat employees as replaceable will always lose to those that don't." Afterward, a young woman approached me. "I'm Tessa," she said. "I just started in algorithm development." She held a portfolio that looked painfully familiar. "How did you know when to stand up for yourself?" she asked. "I waited 12 years too long," I said. "Don't do that." 2 years later, I received a package. Inside was a framed article analyzing Porter's collapse and Radius's rise. A note was attached. "You were never replaceable." Garrick, I hung it in my office as a reminder. Last month, I launched a mentorship program for women in tech. 300 attended the first workshop. Someone asked, "Don't you feel bad about what happened to Porter?" "I feel responsible," I said, "but not guilty. There's a difference." Looking back, I know this wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be invisible. If you're watching this, sitting in a cubicle, wondering whether loyalty will ever be returned, document your work. Know your value, and never apologize for asking to be treated like you matter. Because no one decides your worth but you.